As college teachers, we understand the importance of continuing to learn and grow. And we can do the same thing in our own teaching practice by asking good questions about how students learn best, what are the environmental factors that could help them succeed, and how can we use those insights to improve our teaching endeavors. The way that we can approach doing so is through the scholarship of teaching and learning. In this video, by the end, you will be able to define what the scholarship of teaching and learning is and explain its role in higher education. We will list the steps to follow when completing a SOTL project with specific emphasis on what we're doing in this class. You're going to identify potential research questions and methodologies that can be implemented to complete a SOTL project. And finally, you're going to generate a list of keywords that you can use to start searching for literature to support your SOTL project idea. So what is the scholarship of teaching and learning? There are many definitions. I have a few here that I think really highlight the key components. This first one says it's simply the study of teaching and learning and the communication of findings. So it's really two parts: identifying and studying teaching factors or situations or how students learn, and then communicating that to a broader audience. Trigwell extends upon this idea by saying it's the scholarship of teaching is about making transparent for public scrutiny how learning has been made possible. In many areas of research and discovery, it's not accepted as practice or as a good result until it's been through a peer review process. So that's what the scholarship of teaching and learning emphasizes, is that if you're trying something in your classroom and you collect data to determine its effectiveness, you need to then share that with the broader profession for scrutiny and then perhaps wider adoption. So SOTL at the basic level is about improving student learning, and we mainly do that through our teaching practices. And then it's scholarship. So that's the systematic, peer-supported, research-like scholarly process. So it's bringing what we know about research into our classroom and then extending the results of what we learn through that research effort. So SOTL is about asking some key questions, and this really starts to derive out of your own teaching practices. So you might ask, why did this teaching strategy, whether it be an activity, a lecture, a discussion topic, work or not work? If it didn't work, you might ask, why did it not achieve the intended outcome? Or if you're trying something new and it went really well, you might start to focus on what were those factors of success. And then once you have that information, how can you determine if it was actually effective? So you might know anecdotally that students liked or didn't like an activity. Well, then how can you examine what was it about it? And then with whom and how will you share those experiences so that others can learn from it? So I'd like you to reflect upon your time as a college student or a college teacher and consider why we should participate in the scholarship of teaching and learning. So what are those benefits and rewards of SOTL? So selfishly, I started doing this type of research because my appointment was a majority teaching appointment, but I knew I needed to conduct research to move through my tenure and promotion process. But I also knew that if I was going to spend most of my time in the classroom, I wanted to make sure that it was maximized, that my learning activities were effective, and that my students were gaining in meeting those learning outcomes I had established. So the articles that I asked you to read and additional resources have said there's many benefits and rewards of the scholarship of teaching and learning. One, it makes us more informed teachers. We can be aware of what's happening and what are the best practices in the profession. If you're not in this domain most of the time, you could actually collaborate with colleagues in other disciplines and encourage interdisciplinary efforts. At the heart, it improves students' learning, and that's what we hope to accomplish as teachers. We can contribute to the field of teaching to help it continue to grow and evolve, just like our students are changing. Perhaps the best practices need to change with them. And it really does enrich your experience as a teacher, because when you feel like your students are meeting their learning outcomes, you're going to feel more confident and hopefully just feel better about the process of teaching. Another resource I found that said SOTL is really important in improving teaching. And it lists a number of these reasons here. And what I have found is that by engaging in the scholarship of teaching and learning, I can read about others' best practices, but I can also have conversations with people who love to teach. And that helps me bring new ideas into my classroom, new perspectives, and even show off a bit of what I have found to be helpful in my own classroom. So this resource has many of these additional benefits to us as teachers. So Trigwell identified that there are different levels of teaching and learning investigations. And I want to put this out here because I think we all do some sort of scholarly teaching through reflection on, well, that worked well, or well, that didn't go as I expected. And so there are these different levels that you can use when you're starting to engage in this process. One of them is, the production of personal knowledge. So just reflecting on what worked well or what didn't, perhaps in a particular lecture or activity. Then there's another one where you start to talk to others about that and you produce local knowledge. So this is where I might talk to my ag communications faculty members, and as a team we start to discuss what are we noticing in our classes, what are some best practices we've found, how can we help our students in that broader curriculum. And then the other level is more on the SOTL end of things, and this is where you're doing that research but then sharing it so that you're making those insights more public and benefiting the larger teaching profession. So this is where I might take those insights that I see in my classroom, talk to my colleagues, collect data, and share that through a conference presentation or a journal article. This is another resource I found in a different book, and I just wanted to share that scholarship of teaching and learning does kind of exist right here, where it's more of a systematic process where you're making your insights public. But there are many other things we can do as teachers to enhance the profession and ourselves and those around us, whether it be through scholarly teaching, the practice of teaching, or just sharing about teaching. But the scholarship of teaching and learning kind of sits here in this top corner because it's putting that information in a more public space that's been vetted through peer review. So the two articles I asked you to read outline different processes for the scholarship of teaching and learning, but they're very similar. So I took those two, the list of steps in these two articles, and using colors, I tried to align where they are. So Trigwell recognizes you need a theory and an intervention, and so does O'Loughlin. But O'Loughlin is starting with first developing a clear question or hypothesis. And Trigwell, that's a little bit lower in developing the question. But I would say that those areas are all about trying to identify what do you want to research and what else has already been done to support that. Then we move into actually doing your classroom research or your SOTL project through different methodologies. You're going to get IRB approval. You're going to collect your data. Then you move into producing a result, so analyzing your data and presenting findings in some way. And then finally, you might move it into the actual, like a SOTL article or having it submitted to peer review, which can sometimes happen through a conference presentation, definitely would happen through a journal article submission. So what I want to point out is these steps above the line are what you're going to do in this class through your SOTL project proposal. So you're not actually going to collect any data or analyze it by the end of the semester, but you are going to do the background research, you are going to form a question to explore, and consider the best steps you would take to do so. So what is this SOTL project proposal? There's a longer assignment description online, and it is based on a question or challenge you're interested in exploring, maybe in your own teaching efforts or in a future college teaching experience. It does need to be focused on college teaching because that's the literature I want you to read and know a little bit better. I want you to consider, what that question is, and I hope through this week's module, you'll be able to start to refine what that area is. And again, you are not required to conduct the study. You're only going to propose it as if you were submitting it for maybe a campus teaching grant or IRB, or you're working with colleagues to actually start to collect this data. In the next video, I'm going to walk through those steps that you'll complete in more detail now that you have an understanding of what the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning is and how you're going to approach it this semester.